It's a really weird day in the National Hockey League. Because yesterday we had ourselves 0 games on the schedule, 2 days ago we had 14 games on the schedule, and 3 days ago we had, once again, 0 games on the gosh darn schedule. NHL, what the hell are you guys doing? It's all over the place, it's weird, and even today, 15 games on the schedule, and so many of these are starting at 10 a.m. PST, 11 a.m. PST, you've got a bunch starting at noon and 12:30 PST time, by the way, that's what I'm referring to. So today's a weird day, because when it comes to scheduling videos, I try not to make videos on teams that are playing, like, whilst the videos are being uploaded, because most of the fans are going to be tuned into the actual games rather than watching YouTube videos about their teams, but for this one, I feel like because this topic is so big and so bold, and the Washington Capitals and Pittsburgh Penguins do not actually have their games on until a few hours later into the day, I wanted to talk about the cultural reset that was the Alex Ovechkin and Sidney Crosby debate. The reason we're talking about this is because yesterday, Rob Rossi posted a beautiful article on The Athletic talking about both Sidney Crosby and Alex Ovechkin, and how they quote-unquote saved the NHL, but how they're also not done yet. Now, The Athletic is paid for content, the paywall exists, so if you want to go ahead and read this article, it will be linked in the description if it piques your interests. But, to help us out with the entire idea, the heart and soul of this video, and getting into how Crosby and Ovi saved the NHL, quote-unquote, we're heading over onto The Score, because Sean O'Leary has all the quotes from Alex Ovechkin himself that go over pretty much this story here. This Score article is going to be linked in the description as well. Ovechkin reflects on his career with Sidney Crosby. "We saved the NHL" is the quote. Let's read into this piece and see what is mentioned by Rob Rossi on The Athletic. Alex Ovechkin wants the NHL's new generation of superstars to recognize they have a long way to go in order to match what he and Sidney Crosby have accomplished since entering the NHL in 2005. Crosby and I, we saved the league. Now they come in, and I guess we're old news. But we saved it. It's up to those guys to come in and prove me wrong that we're not the best. We saved the NHL. The article then goes over the history. Ovi and Crosby were drafted first in 04 and 05, yada yada yada, the numbers, the goals, the production, you know the drill. Ovi and Crosby have both been phenomenal NHL players, and you cannot discredit whatever it is these guys have as captains, as champions, as players who would consistently win hardware. Art Ross, Rocket Richard, Stanley Cups, these guys were both once-in-a-lifetime type of talents. And when it comes to the idea of them quote-unquote saving the NHL, my immediate instinct when I saw the quote and when I read the piece, I was like, you know what? Ovi actually has a point here. And I think if you asked Sidney Crosby this same question, did you guys save the NHL, quote-unquote? Like, Crosby is too humble of a guy to ever even acknowledge that that idea is up in the air. But for Ovechkin, he never really was the guy to save face when he makes comments, so obviously it comes with the territory. We expect bigger and bolder quotes out of Ovechkin, and that is exactly what we got here. But realistically, I don't think this is all too inaccurate, how Crosby and Ovechkin came into the NHL and put a new stamp on what was going to be the future of this league. To help us out, we're going over onto the Our Hockey subreddit because there are some really good comments made by a lot of older folks that go over why exactly everything works out this way and why Ovechkin actually does kind of have a point. Full disclosure, for me, I'm born in the year 2000, so maybe a lot of these perspectives that I'm sharing, I don't really relate to a lot of these because I'm not as old as some of the people commenting this, but one of the comments that I thought was really interesting was made by L-Tree. Take a look at this comment here on Reddit. Ovi versus Sid was honestly the real deal the first 5 years of their careers. I think a lot of people forget how close the two players were at one time. Ovi had 529 points and 269 goals in 396 games, winning the Calder in their head-to-head rookie seasons, also winning 2 Harts, 2 Lindsays, 2 Richards, and 1 Art Ross. Crosby had 506 points in 371 games. He had 1 Hart, 1 Lindsay, 1 Art Ross, and 1 Rocket Richard. Crosby also had 2 finals appearances and 1 Stanley Cup. Crosby and the Penguins won their only head-to-head playoff matchup against Ovi and the Caps. This series was everything the league wanted. Crosby and Ovi's dueling hat tricks game, and the series went to 7 games too. Not to mention how Ovi had like 14 points in that series, as pointed out by the next comment. To think, these guys had all these awards, all these trophies, before the 2010s hit. And these guys being drafted in 04 and 05 really goes to show just how dominant both Ovi and Sid were. Here's another comment: no way the league folds without them. Crosby saved the Penguins for sure. The commenter replies, says, yeah, the idea of them saving the NHL shouldn't be taken too literally, but the league was sagging bad. There were no superstars, scoring was way down, and they just lost a season due to the lockout. I'm old enough to remember the NHL being in dire straits. They injected new life into the league, and filled the gap of Mario, Wayne, and Lindros that was not yet replaced. And in response, there is another comment saying, hey, yeah, great take. There was 100% a low period in the early to mid-2000s where the 90s stars were fading and had not been replaced by a new generation of superstars. The game was pretty stale. I love Marcus Naslund, but the fact that he was in the conversation as one of the best players in the game speaks to the lack of star power in the league in those days. And that's kind of something that I think a lot of Canucks fans, because this commenter is a Canucks fan, it's told by his flair, a lot of Canucks fans might go out there and say, yeah, I mean, Bertuzzi, Naslund, these guys were some of the best players in the NHL at that time. And while that might have been true, the fact is, I mean, even just looking throughout the history of the Canucks, Henrik Sedin or Naslund, probably Henrik Sedin. Pavel Bure or Naslund, probably Bure. Even Elias Pettersson or Naslund, JT Miller or Naslund. Like, you could very well debate that the superstars in the early to mid-2000s that were not, like, 90s phenoms, you could debate that these guys were not really, like, the best franchise-defining, league-defining superstars like Crosby and Ovechkin were. And this comment from Burf goes out there and explains the numbers. Crosby and Ovi being generational talents was obviously a huge marketing boost, but the rule changes were equally as important too. Had those two not come along, the scoring changes alone would have revitalized interest in the NHL to a large degree. In 03-04, 79 points was good for 10th in the NHL in scoring. St. Louis miraculously got 94 to lead the league. In 05-06, 10th in NHL scoring was 93 points by Jonathan Chichu, nearly the same numbers as the scoring lead pre-lockout. There were 7 100-plus point players, 2 of which were Crosby and Ovi. But you had other NHL players like Thornton and Alfredson who were well-established NHLers with huge scoring boosts. The 79 points that would have gotten someone 10th in league scoring pre-lockout would have put them at 27th the year after. So, Crosby and Ovi came along at the right time, the best time, and they headlined this generation of new NHL talents who might have come from the ashes of yesteryear and newer guys who have broken onto the scene into dominating the league in ways that we hadn't seen in a while. Guma Stomping, okay, I'm not going to read that username, says, yeah, I don't know if Ovechkin is wrong at all. I try to think if Crosby and Ovi never happened, would someone else have stepped up, or would we have treated other young promising players as if they were Ovi and Crosby? Interesting to think on. A reply here says, maybe Kane versus Malkin would have been kind of a rivalry, but it definitely would not have been the same. Defensive centers like Taves and Kopitar, Bergeron, Americans Ryan Miller and Jonathan Quick versus Canadiens, Carey Price and Luongo, they still had guys they could have marketed, but Crosby versus Ovi was definitely the biggest story in the NHL when I was growing up. And then the response to that is, yeah, I mean, goalies and defensive-minded forwards are hard to market to new or casual fans. The league needed offensive superstars, and that is what Crosby and Ovi were, are, and will hopefully continue to be as the NHL season continues. If you wanted the update, Sidney Crosby at the time of recording this audio, and I say that because, hey, this video and the stats are going to be outdated within the next few hours because both of these teams play games, but Crosby has 22 points in 18 games, he is on pace for 101, and he's on pace for a 55-goal year. Crosby last got 50 goals in 2009-2010, over a decade ago. So if this continues, that is obviously going to be awesome. And then for Alex Ovechkin, we did talk about this a few weeks ago that he did start out the year with a pretty bad slump. But he's got 12 points in 16 games right now. He's on pace for about 62 points, on pace for only 26 goals. So the Wayne Gretzky record seems to be slipping further and further away. But hopefully Ovechkin is able to turn it back on and get back up to 30, 40, maybe even 50 goal form. Because we know that he is that gosh darn good. It's just between the ears and behind the eyes, right? So let me know your thoughts in the comment section below about the idea of Ovechkin and Crosby having saved the NHL in the mid-2000s and whether or not you agree or disagree. I hope you enjoyed this video, and bye.